So, hello and welcome. I'm Joey Clifton, and today I am with Anya Morris of the Sustainable Food Trust. Hi, Anya.
Hello.
And so we are representing the food sector today in our interview. And I wonder if we can just kick off, Anya, with a little bit of an overview about kind of what your kind of career progression to date has been, and then kind of what you do now.
Sure. Um, uh, so where to? Well, now I head up communications at the Sustainable Food Trust, and the Sustainable Food Trust is a relatively new, small charity that focuses on catalysing change within the food system. So we take a systemic view of food and food production from farming right through to diet and health and nutrition, and we try and focus on what are the points of intervention where we can catalyse change, whether it's through research and policy or collaboration and leadership or communications and public engagement, so working in those three areas. But I come from I'm not quite sure how far back you want me to go in terms of career progression.
Just to give people an overview of kind of like where you've been and like the sorts of organisations maybe you worked in or the sorts of study you did or...
Yeah. So I suppose I've always been relatively self-organising in the sense of I finished my A-levels and had a very normal job working in business development, and was going to go to university in Sussex and study international relations and cultural policy, I believe, and then I had a baby instead. So I had my daughter when I was 21, and after my maternity leave I was wondering what it was I should do with my days, and coincidentally it was at the same time as I had to take responsibility for feeding this small child that I had brought into the world, and the process of doing that made me particularly interested in food and how we feed ourselves. So I ended up setting up a lunchbox scheme so that we would deliver healthy, organic, nutritious lunches to people's homes in the mornings before the children left for school, so that the children could take healthy, organic lunchboxes with them. We were, to be honest, it was just serendipitously lucky that we got started about 6 months before Jamie Oliver did his sustainable food school food expose. So we just were in a very fortunate position of being in the right place at the right time, and because of my work with Little Blue Box, which is what the project was called, I found out about an organisation called Slow Food, and Slow Food are an international organisation which help people to organise themselves locally in communities and take on activities which are interested in food systems change or food culture. And coincidentally, Slow Food had opened a university in Italy in 2004 that specialised in gastronomic sciences. And I knew I wanted to work in food, and I knew I definitely wanted to go back to university, but I didn't. Well, it seemed to me at the time that there were kind of two entry points in the UK. You could either be a chef or a restaurant manager, and that meant committing to a lot of work standing on your feet and a lot of long hours and very unsociable hours if you also happen to have small children, which I did. Or you could be a food technologist and you could go down the food laboratory route, which was about product development and testing and sensory analysis and health and safety and quality assurances, and that didn't appeal to me either. So I was really searching for something which allowed me to learn about food in a much broader sense, so food policy and food culture. And the Slow Food set up the University of Gastronomic Sciences, which did essentially that. It's a food sciences degree, so you do concentrate a lot on biology and chemistry and sensory perception, but with a real focus on a global overview of local sustainable food systems and everything that came with that.
Amazing.
So, I applied, well, actually, first of all, I kept watching the university website for about 3 years, going, I'd love to do that. Oh, I'd love to do that. I just had a baby. I couldn't possibly do that. And then when Corin was 3 and the university, I'd been looking at it every year for 3 years, I thought, well, now is, it's time. So I applied and was very fortunate to be offered a full scholarship, which was what gave me the opportunity to go.
Amazing.
So we spent 4 years in Italy, studying and working, and while there, worked together with a group of students from the university to set up something called the Youth Food Movement, which was a network of young food activists across Europe, but also in America and Australia, and looking at how we could engage more young people in slow food and in their local communities, concentrating on food that was, not too expensive and not just about eating well, but also about food access and food justice.
Amazing.
And that project eventually morphed into the Slow Food Youth Network, which is now active in about 20 different countries around the world, with thousands of young people taking action in their local communities.
I see what you mean about self-organising.
Yes.
Don't wait for opportunities to come to you.
Well, no, in a sense. I mean, very much. I suppose what Italy was very good at doing was I already had I already had an idea I wanted to do something, and I knew I wanted the something to be to do with food. But actually, I think quite a lot of young people can be in a similar situation where they have an idea of the kind of area they would like to work in, and a lack of clarity around what that might look like exactly. I think when we're thinking about jobs and careers in the future, we quite often think about quite traditional jobs. I might be a doctor or an accountant or a lawyer, and quite often I think young people know what they don't want without necessarily being able to say exactly what they do want. Absolutely. And I think I was very much in that situation. I wanted to do stuff with food, but I wasn't quite clear about what.
And it sounds like instead of kind of being paralysed by the not knowing what, you kind of just explored and played and kind of saw how trying things either led to where you want it to be or didn't. I think you have to be prepared to play. Actually, I do. I think it's perfectly okay to say, do you know what, I don't know, and therefore I'm going to try out a few different things, and I'm going to do it in such a way as, I was very fortunate. I was very fortunate to have the opportunity to go to Italy, partly because what that did was take me out of my natural environment and put me in a completely different environment, and in an environment with a very, very international group of students. So I was the only English person, and we were French and South American and Dutch and German and Moroccan and African and people from all over the world, which I think I'm a big believer in travel, and I'm a big believer in how interacting with people who are different from the people that you normally know expands your idea of what's possible. Stretches the horizons, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. And it was incredible to have an opportunity to study in the middle of the Italian countryside, surrounded by food culture in that it was expressed in exactly the kind of way that we were learning about. So it was a very rich period in my life for ideas and philosophy of food and discussions and long dinners and conversations. But also, I lived in a very small town with a small group of other international students who really became like family. And I think that's if I was giving advice to other people kind of coming up particularly in this industry, I think I'm a big believer in mentors. I have always had normally other women in my life who were a bit older than me and a bit more experienced than me. And I feel like I've always had the opportunity to learn huge amounts from those people.
So like, what did it give you to have a mentor? What was it kind of?
Well, I think mentors can do two things. They can give you advice and structure, and they can come from a place of experience where if you're panicking or if you're very stressed because you feel like you don't know how to do something, they can really talk you down from that, because we've all been there before. But on the other hand, they can also teach you how not to do things, and I think that can be as equally a valuable experience. I have had projects which you come away from going, I learned so much, and you don't always learn huge amounts from when things go right. Often you learn a lot more from when things also go wrong, and you're able to take the opportunity afterwards to learn from that and reflect and say, okay, this is why, and now I've done it, I know what I'll do differently next time.
And I know that I think quite a lot of people are quite convinced by the concept of mentors, but find it maybe difficult to actually find a mentor. Like, have you got any tips on how to kind of make that happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always been a big believer in contact with people. Like if you communicate out into the world will communicate back. If you sit at home silently looking at your computer but never say anything to anyone, then the opportunities don't find you automatically. There are mentorship schemes. I know there's women in business networks and those sort of things which you can Google and find out about. I didn't actually ever participate in a formal mentorship network. I was just very fortunate to run into other inspiring women in my life, I think. But you know, I would say the same about searching for a job. I identify the people who, in the industry that you're interested in, who you have huge admiration for, who you feel are doing great work, and don't be afraid to get in touch. You'd be surprised how many people will respond to emails. We have a constant incoming stream of communication now from people who are looking for internships or jobs, and we really do make the effort to communicate with people because, you know, we were there once too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's a really nice thing to remember. Is, you know, everyone who's higher up the ladder now was at the bottom at one point, and they, you know, everybody wants to help.
Everybody starts somewhere.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, what were the particular challenges that you feel like you've faced along your journey so far?
Yeah. Well. What were the particular challenges? I mean, being a young mum was challenging. I was very fortunate because my little girl is a gem, and she was very easy. So when I moved to Italy, she came with us, and as part of that kind of student community, she was almost our class mascot. And I always used to say about Corin that, you know, I didn't raise her; the whole community did. But at the same time, trying to figure out how to balance being a parent and everything that goes with that, and wanting to do the best by your children, and working, particularly I think in sustainability, which is quite often my job. Certainly can involve extremely long hours. It can involve a lot of travel. It can involve, and none of those things are things which particularly coincide with having small children. I'm very fortunate in that my children's father has always been very supportive, and I do think whether it's a parent or a partner, it can be a real help to have somebody else who is willing to help sort of support on that side of things. I think money is another kind of challenge which a lot of young people getting into these careers need to try and overcome. I'm a big believer in internships. The second year I was at university, I came back to the UK and I spent the summer organising the Organic Food Festival here in Bristol. And as a result, I made contact with the chap who was then director at the Organic Soil Association, who is the man I now work for. And really, I spent 6 weeks working my socks off for free. But the contacts and the network and the job opportunities that I developed as a result really have led to everything I now do. Everything I now do is as a direct result of that internship. And I know there's been an awful lot of controversy in the media about, you know, internships and people working for free. And okay, if an internship means that you're stacking shelves at Tesco for free and at the end of it you're not really going to have moved yourself forward in any meaningful sense, then yes, that's not right. But actually internships can be hugely beneficial experiences. But how to balance that, the what you need to do in order to open doors and what you need to do in order to pay the bills are not always the same thing. And I think you have to try and find ways which will enable you to do a bit of that. And sometimes that means in the initial instance going a bit above and beyond a normal 9 to 5. I mean, I think the thing about sustainability, particularly as an industry, is that I'd like to think that there's opportunities for everybody, because there is no such thing as too much of it. We need as many people doing as much stuff as they possibly can. But I'm also quite fortunate to find myself in a position with an organisation where I get paid a decent salary for the work that I do. And for an awful lot of people, and I know a lot of them here in Bristol, who are doing community work and brilliant work, whether it's feeding homeless people or running food workshops in community kitchens, or that work can actually be very low income in terms of what you generate. So figuring out the balance between how you do what you love and how you get paid for doing what you love is something that we have to think about. And
reconciling that maybe at an early stage to check that you're in the right industry, possibly.
You know, outside of going to sleep, you're going to spend more time in your life working than anything else you do. So do what you love. Like if you don't wake up in the morning and feel like what you're doing is meaningful, and you know, my work is my job, but I do it even if I wasn't getting paid, because I fundamentally believe that changing food systems is important for the future of the planet and the future of society. And I've got small children, and it really bothers me that I read my son's storybooks with elephants and polar bears in, thinking that in 20 years' time these things might not exist anymore. You know, like so I think pick something that you care passionately about, and then find a way to get someone to pay you to do it. Rather than trying to fit yourself into a box the other way around.
Love it. And there was something else in what you just said as well about, you know, you said you did the 6-week internship, and then that led moderately directly to the job you're in now. And that isn't something that just gets handed to you on a plate, though, is it? That's very much a kind of, you have contacts, you follow up those contacts. That's kind of very much, again, self-organisation, really making the most of everything that's kind of there available to you.
Also, I think you have to be prepared to communicate, and not like in a sort of you know, hunting down, you know, fiercely ambitious sort of a way. But if you put yourself out there into the world and you're very positive and enthusiastic about what it is you're looking for, then the more people you talk to and you engage them in your idea of why you're so passionate about doing something, the more likely you are to find opportunities in that area. So it wasn't a case of just coming and doing the internship and then, you know, the job I do here, it was 2 years after the internship was finished that I ended up in the position that I was in. And that was a case of, you know, remembering to send the director a Christmas card, and remembering to send the odd email and keep them posted about what I was doing after university. And then when I moved to Bristol, the fact that we were in the same city, and shall we have a cup of coffee? And you know, so you just, I think, be a communicator, be an active communicator with whoever your targets might be. But targets is a terrible word, because really it's about maintaining relationships, isn't it? Positive relationships with people.
So if you were to give, I mean, you've kind of given lots of advice already, but if there was any more advice you would give to someone starting out in this sector, or someone maybe struggling to kind of figure out their way, can you think of anything else that kind of comes up for you?
I think there's a greater need for people to be aware of the way in which they work well in the world, if that makes sense. And I'll explain in the sense of, I think we now have an education system which categorises people, and the majority of those industries involve kind of sitting behind a desk and doing work at a computer. And because I work with a lot of farmers and food producers and young people who care passionately about sustainable communities, you really see that, you know, there's a whole range of work out there, and it doesn't have to be based in the office. So, you know, if you have an office job but you love being on an allotment at the weekend with your hands in the dirt, or you love cooking but you don't ever really think being a cook was a decent career, I think people should really take the time to understand what they're passionate about and where their strengths lie in the types of work that they do. We need an awful lot more people in this country who make and create things, and not people who just happen to be online or behind a computer. And if your job involves you spending more time behind a computer, as mine now does these days, I really try and address that balance by looking for opportunities to put my hand in the dirt. So I'm also involved with my local community orchard, or growing vegetables at home, or because I know that balance in my life is really important.
Brilliant.
Any other advice? Don't be prepared to take risks. I think, be prepared to look at something and think, that would be my dream job, but maybe I don't have the experience, or I don't have the background. Or I think you should be prepared to kind of aim big, because even if you interview for things that you don't get, the process of interviewing will really help you on your journey towards wherever it is you might be heading. And I think be prepared to run with opportunities, even if they're not exactly what you wanted in the first instance. So I have 2 or 3 girls now working in the office who came to us as interns, and they worked for free on a particular project, and they were able to highlight their skills in a certain area, and as a result that's translated into paid work. Maybe you find a job you really like, but there's only 2 days a week available. I think be prepared to go with the 2 days a week, because you're much more likely to develop an opportunity once you have a relationship with somewhere. Absolutely. Rather than holding out for your exact idea of how something should be.
So there's perfect doesn't really exist, basically, does it? It's just kind of going with the flow and seeing and making the most of whatever does come up. Fantastic.
I would think so. And I would say, you'd be amazed how getting involved in something, even a community project or volunteering somewhere, can lead to other things, because at least what you're doing is building relationships in the community or the area that you want to work in.
Absolutely. And you touched on balance in that, about kind of, you're very much desk-based now, but you make time to... I've got my eyes on the time as well, don't worry.
Sorry, I'm all right.
You make time to just kind of keep your hands in the dirt as well, which I love. And the last question I have for you is about the kind of the balance, the sanity, the boundaries piece, which we kind of touched on before we came online. I personally think staying sane in this particular profession in sustainability generally is really, really important, because it is such a passion-based kind of pursuit, I guess. And I think overwhelm and it being just a scary thing to work in happens to everybody. So I don't know if you have any thoughts on that, or whether you feel the same, or what you do about it.
I do have some thoughts on that. I should say I strive for balance and I rarely achieve it. I think that's something to say. I think there's a couple of points to make. I would say watch out for the Messiah complex. This is something my mother always talks to me about. When I think about when in my career will I be happy? When will it be enough? When fundamentally the answer is, when I've changed the world, when we live in a world where all these food systems are localized and diverse and abundant, and society is happy and actually it's really easy to put yourself into overwhelm if your idea of success is when I have changed the world. You have to kind of get off that, and I think it really helps to try and come from a place where I try and think about it in the context of the world is going to be whatever it's going to be, regardless of what you as an individual do or don't do. Society as a whole will make choices about the direction it wants to go in, and it would be nice if we were making healthier and more sustainable choices. But if we don't, then that's not my responsibility. That's our collective decision as society to move in that direction. And I can spend my life doing the most meaningful and work that I possibly can, and if that has an impact and creates change, then brilliant. But you can't benchmark yourself against how successful you are at changing the world, because it will never be enough, and you'll always feel like it's never enough, and it will always be this huge and overwhelming thing. So all that any of us can do is play our part to the best of our abilities. So remembering that, I think, is important.
Brilliant.
I was going to say something else. Flexibility. Flexibility and dynamism. I don't know if that's a word.
We know what you mean.
I try quite hard not to think of. I'm somebody who recognises that I work very productively on a project to project basis. If I'm in a situation where I feel like from 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, I'm doing the same thing, I actually become increasingly unproductive, because it's very difficult to self-motivate in that way. So I try and break up my year into projects. And I know that for 3 months I'm going to be particularly focused on this big conference that we just did before Christmas is a great example.
Yeah.
For those 3 months, there was no balance in my life. There was
Yeah.
nothing outside of my work, you know, from first thing in the morning till tea time to going home, putting the children to bed and carrying on straight afterwards till midnight and getting up the next day and doing it all again. But I don't mind working like that because I know it's only temporary.
Yeah.
And I know that for those 3 months I will give my all, but there'll be a consequence and a benefit to that. The other example is that during August, two of our directors here at the Sustainable Food Trust are farmers, and they go back to the farm to make hay. So we almost close the office for a month during August. So I think it's trying not to be too wedded to orthodox structures about 9 to 5 Monday to Friday, and be more flexible in terms of being able to go above and beyond sometimes, but then recoup that time at other times.
Yeah, love it. And that's kind of really cyclical, isn't it? That's the way life is, isn't it? You know. So it's really nice that you know not necessarily reflect the seasons or whatever, but see that there's motion in that flow.
Yeah. And also I think there's something about being connected to the seasons. I've been thinking about this recently in terms of lots of January detoxing and health kicks and you know, this year I'm going to be a better person. Well, actually, you know, winter is cold and it's a time to kind of hunker down and hibernate a little bit and not kind of push yourself, you know, wait for spring, wait for the weather to start to get warmer and the days to start to get longer, and then kind of you can be in a period of renewal and change. But I think actually this period needs to be a bit more about reflection and looking at sort of where you've come from and where you want the next year to go for you. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Thank you so much for your time, Aine.
It's an absolute pleasure.
And all the best. Have a lovely rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.